So your why is where all your decisions point to. And so if you're off on that, if you're not clear on that, then you're making decisions that aren't in alignment with the things that are important to you, which is why it's really important to go back and revisit it on a regular basis.
I start off this whole podcast and I say, things get in the way. Tax law change, economy change, job change, sandwich generation. Something happens, an unexpected birth, an unexpected death, an unexpected something that affects your puzzle. You got to pick up those pieces, put them back together, and sometimes they go back in the same order and sometimes they don't.
On my deathbed, what would I regret more? And let that be a guiding force for making decisions. And usually what that does is it pulls out the things that are most important. It helps you focus on the things that are most important.
Welcome to another edition of the Financial Puzzle Playbook with your host, Jim Sumpter. I'm RJ Malik, producer of this podcast. And Jim, you have a returning guest. Looking forward to this. Brendan has been with us before, and it's always an interesting conversation. So why don't you take it away, introduce Brendan formally, and then tell us what you're going to be talking about on this podcast.
Sounds great. Thank you, RJ. And yes, we do have a returning guest, Brendan Frazier, who was about this time last year that I think we kind of got together, did a couple episodes, and we're going to do that same thing today. Thank you for driving in from Nashville this morning.
Yep.
And so I'm sure traffic was light. It was super easy, no problems at all.
Never a problem.
Never a problem. No. So Brendan is the Chief Behavioral Officer for RFG Advisory, which, as I've shared before, is the registered investment advisor that we use for CMC Financial. So really, Brendan, you're a resource to advisors, you're a resource to clients. I know we have an event coming up in January where you'll be speaking with some of our clients. And, as we were preparing for today, it was like, okay, what topic do we want to talk about? And I mean, there is a plethora of topics that we could have gone through. And I think the one that we sort of settled on for this episode is, we're going to talk about a circle, a golden circle. And what it does is, I'm always talking to clients about, what you need to do for a specific goal, how you need to achieve a specific goal. And then what you're going to do is really kind of drill down into why we do what we do. And so I know you've shared this information. Really, the first time I heard you do this was to a group of students. And I thought that is fascinating, and it would be great for the audience for the podcast. Just really kind of talk about that. So if you don't mind, answer two questions. Number one, what is a chief behavioral officer? And then secondly, we'll start kind of getting into this circle concept.
Yeah. So what is a chief behavioral officer is a great question, and one that my friends, even to this day, and even my family want to know the same answer to is what is that? 'Cause it's not something that you've heard of often. I think there's only one other chief behavioral officer in the financial services industry. And so RFG has sort of been a pioneer with this role, which is on one hand a great thing. And on the other hand, it makes it really, really hard to tell people and explain to people what you do.
What you do
for a living.
What do you do for a living?
The easiest way to explain it in a way that people actually care or understand is just to say that I think for most of the history around money and education and knowledge as it relates to money, we tend to just think about the spreadsheets and the numbers and the dollar signs and how much we have and what's in our account and the time value of money. And it's been very numbers focused, very logical, very technical. And all those things are good and important. And I mean, if you go ask for money advice, it's almost always going to be something very strategic and tactical that you can do. That's where a lot of the knowledge and information and education focuses. But I think what's sort of started to become more well-known or more widely accepted is the fact that money's not just logical. It has a completely human, emotional, psychological, and behavioral element to it. And I think anybody knows, nobody disagrees with that, right? Nobody says, oh yeah, no, money's not emotional. I don't feel emotions around my money. We all know it's the case, but for whatever reason, it just sort of got suppressed when we think about the knowledge and the education and the insights that are out there around money. So a big part of my role is to help spread that message, bring the education, bring the awareness to, hey, here are the emotional aspects. Here's how money can be emotional. And here's probably most importantly, people just want to know, okay, that's good, but like, what do I do about it?
Right.
How do I do these? So that's what my job is to make people more aware of this aspect of money, and then give them playbooks and frameworks and processes for how to handle it. Just like you would say, hey, if I wanted to save X, how do I do it? It's like, hey, if anything with the emotional side, you go, hey, if I want to make sure that I'm not falling prey to some bias that my brain's made me more susceptible to, like, well, here's a framework or a process for how to do that. So
Right.
that's the gist of it.
Right. Well, I appreciate you sharing that because it sort of dovetails into, the whole point of this podcast is it's the financial puzzle playbook. So what does that look like? Is we talk about cash flow, we talk about investments, insurance, we talk about goals, whether it be retirement or education or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has an income tax consequence, and then we talk about estate. And what we're going to touch on today with this concept of this golden circle, quite honestly, would apply to any single one of those areas.
Mm-hmm.
And, RJ always asks me at the beginning, Jim, what topic or what puzzle piece are we going to touch? Well, I will say this topic could apply to any single one of these.
Mm-hmm.
If it's cash flow, if it's setting a budget, it certainly applies. If it's retirement planning, why are we saving for retirement? It applies. If it's estate planning, why are we creating a will or a trust or an estate document in the way that we are doing it? It applies. And so as we start drilling down on this and this whole concept, I'd like for everybody to sort of keep that in mind, that it doesn't matter what financial decision you're making or what choices you're making, this concept applies to any of them.
Yeah.
And that's what's so cool about it. So let's kind of start breaking into this. What is this golden circle concept?
Yeah. So if we start highest level on this, it comes from the work of Simon Sinek, who I think most people are familiar with now at this point. And
Right.
it kind of centers around his idea of starting with why and putting why at the center of everything. And so I always like to frame it this way. There are two possible outcomes with our money. Either we choose to use it intentionally or it gets chosen for us. What do we mean by it gets chosen for us? So there's this thing out there that psychologists call mimetic desire. Mimetic desire is if I'm not consciously aware of and intentionally making a decision that's in alignment with what I think is important and prioritize, then I'm just naturally going to default to what do I see around me? I'm going to make decisions based on other things that tell me something's important. So here's an example. If my wife and I think, hey, we want a new car or we need a new car, if we're not intentional about, hey, here's what we want to spend and why we need it and here's why we want it, we'll go, well, everybody else that we know has this, right? Everybody drives this car. We probably need a new car. Let's just get that one. It might be, hey, everybody around us is buying a beach house. Let's think about, should we buy a beach house? It's those types of keeping up with the Joneses to some degree, right? There's another element of it that comes into play where oftentimes if we're not intentionally using our money, we'll fall back on beliefs that we formed when we were younger, like in childhood. And so a classic example of this is the person that drives the 14, 16, 18-year-old beat up car. And you sit there and you're like, why are you still driving that car? And they're like, well, because you don't buy a new car until you drive it into the ground. Otherwise, it gets you from point A to point B. Otherwise, what's the point? You don't need to spend more money on a car. And oftentimes, that's not bad advice. Don't hear me say that. But oftentimes what you find is it's like, well, that's how my dad thought about, or my mom or my dad or my parents thought about money. And so if we're not intentional about the choices that we make, both in life, but especially with money, then it'll be chosen for us sort of subconsciously based on a lot of these factors. So the idea behind the golden circle says, let's get really, really clear on why we do what we do, on what the things are that are really, really important to us so that we can make financial decisions that are in alignment with what we value, with what we really actually want in life. So we don't just go buy, and I'll use this example again here in a second, so that we don't just go buy a beach house to do it, but we know whether or not that's the best use of our money at the time that we need to make the decision. So if you think about why it's called the golden circle, is I think they call them concentric circles, is what they say. So it's like there's three circles, a circle, inside of it's a circle, and then inside of that is another circle. The outside circle is what? The middle circle says how, and then the middle circle says why. And so the way most people think about their money and their life, again, we're talking about money, but this applies just to life too, is they usually go from the outside in and they'll say, here's what I want to do and here's how I'm going to get there. So they'll say, I want to lose 20 pounds. That's what I want to do. Here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to start eating better. I'm going to work out more. I'm going to get an accountability partner. And so we tend to operate most of our decisions that way. What do I want to do? How do I want to do it? We don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about the why. I always say that behind every what lies a why. We just have to get there. We just have to go beyond the what, the surface level, and dive deeper to figure out what that is. So I use that example of losing 20 pounds because I had a friend, and this is the example I used when you heard me. I had a friend who said, hey, I want to lose 20 pounds. That's what he wanted to do. He said, here's how I'm going to do it. So he built out this nutrition plan, workout plan, hired a trainer. But after talking to him for a little bit, what came to the surface was his why. And his why, it wasn't that he wanted to lose 20 pounds. That's not why he would eat healthier. That's not why he would get up early in the morning and do it to work out. His why was that he was getting older. He has 3 kids at home. They're getting a little bit older. They're active. And so he found himself tired and fatigued and unable to be like as present and active with the kids as he wanted to be because his health was sort of suffering. And so he said, I don't like this. I don't like the way that I feel. I want to be able to be more present and active with my kids. And so what looked like the goal was, if we say we start with what, right? What he wanted to do was lose weight. And sure, that's what he wanted to do. But his why was he wants to be more present and active. And so when it comes to thinking through any decision in life, instead of going outside in, we want to go inside out and understand what are our core reasons, core motivations, core desires behind why we do what we do. So for him, he would start with, I want to be more present and active with my kids. How am I going to do it? I'm going to put together this workout plan, eat healthier. I'm going to hire a personal trainer. And what I'll end up doing is probably losing 20 pounds as a result. And what that does is those mornings when he wakes up and his alarm goes off at 5:30, and if the alarm went off and his main thought was, I need to lose 20 pounds, well, you're probably going to stay under the covers where it's nice, warm, and cozy and think, well, I could lose, it'll take a while, I'll lose 20 pounds later. But if you're going, hey, the alarm goes off, it's dark, I feel comfortable in this bed, but I'm getting out of this bed because I want to be able to be more present and active with my kids, that just hits differently, right? That motivates you in a different way, and it helps you get clear on the things that are actually really important to you in your life. So that's the sort of the explanation. It starts with being intentional. We want to be intentional with our money. We want to determine the outcome of our money. And this is one of the elements. This is the kind of the core framework to think through to do it, is get really clear on what is your why. Why do you do what you do? What are your main motivations and desires? Because generally we don't spend enough time thinking about those things.
Right. So let me ask you this. Let's bring this back to a financial plan. Okay. I always say all financial plans start with cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know what's coming in and what's going out, it doesn't matter.
That's right.
All financial plans end with estate planning.
Mm-hmm.
You want to transfer assets to the next generation or to a charity or to something.
Yep.
And everything in the middle from a financial standpoint is the playbook. Okay. So if you're sitting down as an individual, as a couple, as someone that is thinking about maybe planning for the first time, or you've been planning for 30 or 40 years, how do you take that concept and say, where do I start? Because what happens, and this is one of the things we talked about a year ago when you were on the podcast, is that we can get overwhelmed. We talked about New Year's resolutions. We all have these great ideas, and then it never comes to fruition because life gets in the way.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we take this concept and apply it to each of these pieces, and where do you start?
Yeah. So the good news is the way that you apply it, the way you start figuring it out is the same no matter what piece, no matter what part of the puzzle you think through. So you go through the same process, and then you take what you learn and you can apply it to cash flow, investments, estate, insurance. The key process is part of the process is figuring out your why. That inner circle, your why, is you want to get really, really clear on the things that you value most in life, the things that are truly most important to you in your life. And so there's a number of ways to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So everything from, some people prefer the like, hey, I'm going to sit down and go through and exercise to determine these things, right? Like a card deck that's designed to help me sort through it, or a some people put together these virtual games where you can figure out what are my values in life? What are the things that I value the most? Some people say, hey, I just want to like talk through it and go through this process with my spouse, with my partner, and just sit down and let's map out the things that are most important.
Mm-hmm.
There's a variety of ways, but you ultimately want to boil it down to like, what are the 5 main values that we want to prioritize, or I want to prioritize, or we want to prioritize in our family, right?
Okay.
And so there's card decks, like I said, that you can go through. That's what my wife and I did, right? And you go through it, and it's like we want to prioritize a lot. The top 5, I don't know them off the top of my head, but there's like 5 or 6 that don't really vary much. Like everybody has a core set of values that don't really skew too much. Like family and time with family and presence with family is up there for a lot of people. Not everybody, right? Some people have situations where it's not the case, but for most people, that's always going to be one of their main focuses and priorities. Some people, it's like, I value security and safety. I value adventure. I value learning and knowledge. I value giving back to people, the community. I value mentoring. And you can even go into a whole conversation around why you value those things. I think that's less helpful. You just want to know, like, what are the things that are most important to me in my life? Another thing you can do is you can Google right now, list of values, and you can find a PDF that'll pull up and there'll be like 40 of them listed, right? And you just go through and you go, okay, what are my top 10 that I would want to be known by? Narrow it down to 10. And then you sit there and, okay, if I had to narrow it down to 5 things that I want to be known by, the words that I want people to associate with me, what would that be? And you go through and you pick out your 5. Now, what's funny is that you look at it and like, it's a hard exercise because these are generally good things. And you're like, I don't like, honesty is one of them.
Right.
And you're like, I'm not choosing honesty, but that doesn't mean that I'm dishonest, right? So it's hard, but you narrow it down, you get really clear on the things that are most important to you. And what that does is now gives you a lens through which to make all of your decisions. Or, so let's use cash flow, the very first one, for example, right?
Right.
Not a very fun exercise to go through.
No, it is not. It's
hard to gather the data, hard to put it all together. It can be uncomfortable to look at, right? A lot of people are like, I don't know if I really want to see all. It's not, sort of like stepping on the scale when, after Christmas season, you're like, I don't know if I want to, I probably need to. Yeah. And in addition to that, it's hard to get everything you need to like get the cash flow clean and organized. And so you think, okay, well, what would make that easier? Well, if you have a really, really strong life, you know why it's important to you, then you're much more likely to do it. So if I sit there and go, what I need to do, again, outside circle, what I need to do is send or get to Jim the stuff so that we can put together my cash flow and a cash flow analysis. Well, if my what is so that I can retire in 20 years, that's not very motivating.
Right.
If you're like, hey, if you'll send me that cash flow analysis, what that'll do is it'll give us so for me and my wife, right? Maximizing the experiences that we can have with our kids while they're young is a really big deal. Mm-hmm. And if we're struggling to figure out, hey, how do we allocate money to make this happen? If you go, hey, Brendan, you told me that being able to maximize this time while your kids are young to create these experiences that they'll always remember is important to you. Cash flow is a really important first step to being able to make that happen. And that's a much more compelling way for me. If I sit there and I'm like, I don't want to do this, but it's an avenue to live out the life, the things that are most important to me, you're actually motivated to do it. And it'll help you power through and do the things that you don't want to do. It helps you stay motivated and do the things that you maybe otherwise wouldn't want to do. But it also helps you get clear on, again, why you're doing it.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So, so my youngest is engaged. Okay. So Cassidy and Austin are a young couple beginning to start out in life. And one of the things that I've done as their dad and as a planner is, in fact, when Austin came and asked me if he could marry her, I said yes, but there were some conditions. One of the conditions was I want you to do, call it premarital counseling, whatever, with a financial planner. I said, it can be me, it can be someone else. It does not matter to me, but I want you to do it. Mm-hmm. Because I think it's very, very important that they get started off on the right foot. Yep. Okay. So I develop, and I have this in our practice. If anybody is interested, reach out to me and we can talk about this as a resource. But I have basically a 10-month or a 10-step program for them. The first one is we talked about mindset. Okay. And you alluded to a lot of times we make decisions based on how we grew up. Mm-hmm. We've talked about that at length in our individual lives as well as I think on this podcast. And so mindset, that's one of the first questions I always ask people when they come in as a new prospect is tell me about how you grew up with money. What happens more times than not is the male and the female will answer that question, and many times they're different.
Yeah.
They're different.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing how often that
It
happens?
is absolutely, it's fascinating how often it happens.
I know.
What's even more fascinating is when they both answer that question and they didn't know how the other person was really going to answer.
Yeah.
Because they've never had the conversation.
Right.
That's the reason it is step one for a married couple. Okay. Step two was we're going to create a budget. So we had that meeting. I had lunch with Cassidy and Austin this week. And I just point blank asked them, I said, how's budgeting going? Now they're both in college. So their budgeting as a college kids are different than being married, but I want them to be thinking about it. And they both looked at me and they said, this is hard. So my question to you is, this goes back to the why, because they have to understand why are we budgeting? I've budgeted for years and I still have to sometimes convince myself this is why I'm doing this.
Yep.
And so this is also something that you don't do one time. It's an exercise and we put it on the shelf and say, wow, that was a fun exercise. We never have to look at that again. Thank God.
Right.
Because I think it's ongoing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 100%. Yeah. Also because it shifts.
Right.
Your why can shift. It can change. Now, like some of the core things don't change a lot. Like maximizing the experiences that we have with our family. Like that's probably going to be a core thing for us for a long time. Things can change, right?
Right.
And they do. That's why it's important to go back to revisit and reevaluate. But I know I have somebody that I talked to recently because at this point, I'm always, when I talk to people, I'm always going, there's a what behind, there's a why behind the what. There's a why behind the what. And so I'm always curious to know like what's actually driving people. And so this person I was talking to the other day, they were talking about how to them, it's really important to be able to give back through their resources, whether it's time or money, because that's something that somebody did for them when they were younger and they felt like it propelled them to where they are now in their life. And so it's hard to imagine a future where that's not one of their core driving whys, right? Their core motivations. But there's some things that stay pretty core, but a lot of it'll shift and a lot of it'll change. Like what's important at this phase of your life may not be important 10 years from now. I mean, think back like this. Think back where you were 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, where was I? What was I doing? What did my life look like at that point? And then you go, think about where you are now and think about how different things are, right? We tend to underestimate how much things change. And when we look at there's a term out there, it's called the end of history illusion. When we look at ourselves 10 years from now, we tend to underestimate how much we're going to change. We look and say, that person 10 years from now is going to look pretty much just like I look today. Then we go back 10 years ago and we're like, oh, wait, hang on. I'm a completely different person. So that's why it's important to always to take time to recalibrate that conversation of why am I doing this? Why am I here? How is this helpful? How is this beneficial? It's kind of like you go to the doctor or the eye doctor on an annual basis, right? Just a chance to go in, make sure everything's still on track. Are we still tracking? Do we need to do anything different? This is the same thing. You want to make sure when you set your why, you start aiming everything towards that. It's like, here's why I'm doing it. I'm going to start setting money aside so that we can take these trips with our kids. We want to buy a beach house. I'm going to take some of my money out of my investments and go buy this beach house. Those are big decisions. And so your why is where all your decisions point to. And so if you're off on that, if you're not clear on that, then you're making decisions that aren't in alignment with the things that are important to you, which is why it's really important to go back and revisit it on a regular basis.
Right. When you say regular basis, is that something that you do as a couple, as an individual in your own mind? Do you do it with your planner? Or do you do it with all? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think annually is ideal. I mean, probably more often than that couldn't hurt.
Right.
But like most people are going to be like, well, we're likely not going to do that often.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think annually, if you do it as a couple, it's great. That's a great way to do it. If you like doing it with a financial advisor or financial planner, they're great at doing that too. The key is just to do it.
Right.
And so for some people, they would say like, well, we know we need to do it. And the way we know we're going to hold ourselves accountable is we have somebody else that does it with us. I mean, you could even do it with some sort of life coach that's out there. There are a lot of people out there that help you build visions for your life. They're life coaches. And I mean, I feel a little bit hesitant mentioning that. I'm not sure they're all, but there's some good ones out there, right?
are.
But sometimes it can be helpful to have a third party to hold you accountable but if you'll do it on your own once a year, just sitting down, revisiting, going, hey, this is what we've said was important to us. Is that still the case? Has anything changed? Is this how we want to anchor ourselves moving into the future? I think one of the main benefits we haven't even gotten to, I'll hit on it quickly, is there's a quote by Roy Disney who said, when your values are clear, your decisions are easy. Roy's no longer alive. If he was, I would call him up and I'd say, Roy, you're brilliant. I just need to make one correction to that. I think they're never easy. Your decisions are never, especially with money. We have trade-offs, right? Money's a finite resource for most of us. And so you can buy anything, but you can't buy everything. So you go, how do I evaluate these trade-offs? Roy Disney said, if your values are clear, that would be an easy decision. I would say it's not easy, but it's easier. If you can get clear on the things that are most important to you, it's a really good tool or filter for figuring out, should I do this or should I do that? Should we buy the beach house or not? Should we help pay for our kids' education or put more money into retirement? Right? It's nice to have a filter or a lens through which to make really, really big, important trade-off decisions.
Hi everyone, I'm Cassidy, the second C in CMC Financial. So Dad sometimes gets on a roll with this podcast and might forget to remind you about a few things. 1, don't forget to like and share this podcast and leave a review. 2, follow CMC Financial on all of the socials, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And 3, go check out the website at cmcfp.com. Okay, back to my dad. He's probably still talking.
So Brendan, as we begin to wrap up this episode, let me ask you this. There's been a lot of talk around, and we could go on for hours about this topic, but there's one group of people that I seem to kind of come across a lot, and maybe it's because my generation. I'm the sandwich generation. Okay.
Yeah, right.
So I'm the generation of you're taking care of mom, dad, and then also you're trying to take care of your children, create experiences for them, or you're trying to teach them as they move on with life. That's where I'm at. Okay. So I've made all these decisions throughout my life that, were for me and the things that I wanted to do. And now all of a sudden, here comes this really big phenomenon where I've never really had to worry about mom before. And now all of a sudden I'm having to. I've always taken care of the kids, but now I'm having to be looking at wedding and potential grandchildren, things like that. So there's this change that happens with this generation. And I get this question so much, and it seems like every week or every month somebody's talking about this. Well, so-and-so, they had to, we had to put them into the home, or somebody's going to need more care, or all of a sudden these massive changes. How does someone emotionally begin to handle that, where you're thinking about not only your why, but mom's why and your kids' why? And all of a sudden it seems like it can get really, really overwhelming. And then they bring that to the advisor, and the advisor is like, well, hell, I don't know. It's like, right. I've always worked with you, and now we're bringing in these other aspects.
Yeah.
How do you kind of start thinking through that?
And are we thinking in terms of how does the person in the sandwich generation deal with who to take care of?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in the sense that you've always made decisions around your what, your how, and your why. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden you still got all that.
Yeah.
And now we're bringing in moms, same things. We're bringing in the kids, same things. Mm. So now all of a sudden you're making all these decisions almost in 3 different ways. Mm-hmm. And it's like, wow, okay. And there's been a lot of articles and talks about this. And I know, I go to conferences and people talk about it from stage, and the sandwich generation. We've really never had a lot of conversation around that generation. Really, until you asked about 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we weren't really talking about that.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, we hear it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. You said you've been to a lot of presentations. I've read some of the stuff on it, right? But you've been to presentations. You've read up on it. You're experiencing it. And part of me thinks and goes, like, it's one of the most, when I think about it, I'm not there. When I think about it, it's got to be one of the hardest positions that you'll ever be in your life.
Yeah.
Both emotionally, but also like mentally and physically. Like, just have to imagine like you're probably more tapped than you've ever been.
Mm-hmm.
And of all the things you've been to and read and seen and tried, like I'm not sure at this point if nobody's really cracked the code.
Yeah.
Right? And so part of what I think is there's so many dynamics at play there. That's probably a whole separate episode. This is going to sound like a cop-out answer,
Okay.
but I'm such a big believer in it that I can't imagine being in that scenario and not at least having a therapist that I could go to and talk to and like work things out with.
Right.
Or have somebody where I could go process everything that's going on. And I'm biased because my wife's a therapist, right? And she's a good one, and so it's probably why I'm biased too. But I just there's so much there.
Mm-hmm.
Probably mostly like big time emotionally that I don't even know if I feel qualified to say like, hey, here's how you handle that.
Well, one of the things about your role is that I think is so cool, and being at a firm where you are in the position that you are, is because I think a lot of times what people do is they go to their trusted advisors.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And in a lot of cases, I'm a trusted advisor to a lot of my clients. So I get asked this question a lot. Right. So I, without the therapist degree, have all of a sudden, I'm the therapist. And you and I have talked about this, wow, we should have taken more psychology classes, And so a lot of times what happens is advisors will come to you with these types of questions. Yeah. Hey, let's look at the research. Let's try to sort of figure through this.
Yeah.
Here's my whole point in that is everybody's going through it. If you're not there yet, you will be potentially, or someone that will. And it's still going to go back to this core principle of why. Why is it important to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and mom and you're nurturing your kids through? Why is it important to make sure that as you're doing all of that, you're still taking care of your financial puzzle and doing the things for yourself and pivoting when you need to? I always talk about my concept of the puzzle. We all have this great puzzle. We think everything looks great. We're sitting at the Thanksgiving table. We're super excited about it. And here comes the dog. The dog runs in, hits the table, and a fourth of the puzzle falls off. And that's life.
Yeah.
I start off this whole podcast and I say, things get in the way. Tax law change, economy change, job change, sandwich generation. Something happens, an unexpected birth, an unexpected death, an unexpected something that affects your puzzle. You got to pick up those pieces, put them back together, and sometimes they go back in the same order and sometimes they don't. I've said that same scenario 1,000 times because I believe it's true. It doesn't matter what stage in life you're in, it's going to happen. And it doesn't matter if it's to you, if it's to mom. Sometimes I'm meeting with a couple of daughters next week who they're now taking care of everything for mom. They're basically my age. So they're doing this, but one of them, they have 2 kids that are engaged. So they're going to have 2 weddings in the next year. Mom is in a facility and they're working and they're taking care of their spouse and. So there's all these things. So it's like, okay, tell me your why. Where do I start?
Yeah.
And I think that's what's important. That's why I wanted to touch this episode so much, is because it is so impactful. Because a lot of times we think money, we think investments.
Yep.
Or we think money, we think tax minimization. Or we think money, or we think credit card, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And it all comes back to, well, why is that important? And as an advisor, and frankly, as you're working with your advisor, if your advisor isn't asking these questions, you might want to rethink how you do that. So, that's what I wanted to kind of touch. What final wrap-up comments on this whole topic?
I think I would just say, as you're laying out that situation, the why is sort of like a movie. It can be a moving target. Like you said, the dog runs in, the puzzle changes, right? Life changes. And so as we think through, like, there's a mental model to making decisions that I like, that I think you almost can't go wrong with, which they call it the frame of the veteran, which is you say, imagine that I'm on my deathbed, 90 years old. What am I going to regret more? And that's another shortcut to figuring out your why, the things that are important to you, right? Like, for example, one of the ones I do with myself all the time is it'll be 5:30 Wednesday night, Right? I'm sitting there in front of my computer and I've got emails galore, right? I'm like, I could sit here and scroll through and respond to a lot more emails. But when I'm 90 years old, am I going to sit on my deathbed and go, I should have responded to more emails? Or am I going to sit there and go, why did you not go home and hang out with your family? Right. And now that's an easy one, but it's always a good frame and a good mental model to make decisions with in difficult scenarios where you're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to determine what's most important to me. Again, frame of the veteran, you say, on my deathbed, what would I regret more? And let that be a guiding force for making decisions. And usually what that does is it pulls out the things that are most important. It helps you focus on the things that are most important.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal. I think it's a great place to end with this episode. So RJ, we could go on for hours on this topic, but we'll end there. Yeah. So
Brendan, before you go, how about some contact information?
Yeah, contact. The RFG Advisory website, I'm on there. LinkedIn, I hang out on there quite a bit. And then if you like this type of content or information, the education on the human side and the behavioral side, I've got a video series on the RFG Advisory website and YouTube channel called Wisdom and Wealth, where we go through a topic every 2 weeks related to something around the emotional and behavioral aspects around money.
Sounds good. Jim, your contact information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to put a plug in for everything that he just said too. So it's phenomenal content. So for us, it's 205-510-9074 is my direct number. You could call or text. CMC Financial is cmcfp.com. Or we're also on all the socials, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and our YouTube channel, which links back to the RFG site. So, Brendan, thank you very much for the information. I think it's a great concept, a great content piece, and looking forward to other discussions in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
Yep.
Sounds good. Gentlemen, it was a great conversation to eavesdrop in on. I certainly enjoyed it. And thank you for listening to the Financial Puzzle Playbook podcast. We ask you to share this podcast, rate it, and leave a review because this actually helps others find the show. Again, thank you for listening. And for Jim and Brendan, plus everyone at Financial Puzzle Playbook, I'm RJ Malik, and we'll see you at the next podcast.